Well, hello, everybody, and welcome in once again to Get to Know the Royals, as I am joined today by our special guest in Mr. Billy Boykin, the head tennis coach here at Queen's University. And Coach Boykin, first off, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you guys are right in the throes of things in terms of postseason, but glad to have you along with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, Coach, I just said you guys have some very talented groups here this season. Both teams ranked in the top 20, and I definitely want to talk about them a little bit more. But that being said, let's talk a little bit about how you made your journey here to Queens. And, of course, it starts all the way back with you as a player, my friend, because, well, you know, you seem to be something else coming out of high school. You're ranked the #1 junior player in the state of North Carolina. You're in Davidson College's Dalton McMichael Scholarship. I guess my first question is, and I love asking coaches this, especially coaches that played, what is it that made tennis stand out to you, and how'd you get involved?
Yeah, it was to some extent, for me, it was an obligation. My father was a coach, a collegiate tennis coach. And, you know, I'm joking, but I would kind of grew up around tennis. We had a tennis family in a lot of ways. I have two sisters, younger sisters, who played collegiately. And my father, you know, we were always around the tennis matches growing up. And his players were just, they could not have been, you know, just more gracious and kind to us. I mean, they were really, I mean, he had, you know, tennis, if you look at our roster, for example, we're very international. We have tremendous diversity on both our men's and women's teams. And the same was true for some of the teams that my father coached when I was growing up. And so there was this whole world of people that we got to interact with from all over. I mean, literally all over the globe. And they were just incredibly kind and just sweet. I mean, we were little kids. We were probably, you know, pestering them to death and bothering them, but they were so nice, giving us piggybacks and that kind of thing, and playing tennis with us. So that just really left, I think, a great impression on us. And I'm really close with my father. He's actually a volunteer, you know, for our teams here at Queens.
Yeah.
He's involved with our programming. And I still, you know, learn a great deal from him and utilize his expertise. But, you know, he and I are really close, and my sisters are obviously really close with him too. And so we all played a little bit of tennis, and that's probably an inherent advantage to some extent. I really liked all sports. For me, I was just, you know, my parents said, you do your homework first, and then you do free time whenever you want, right? Well,
I get it.
Competitive person, so I played a lot of sports, and tennis was just one of those sports that I had probably an unusual amount of access to at an early age. And so that was where, you know, I did want to play something in college. I liked the idea of the marriage of academics and athletics at a high level. So that for me was probably the
Well, you know, I guess the other question I have is, when you talk about, you know, loving tennis and kind of how you came into it, and then you go from being a player, a very good player, and then immediately into the coaching ranks. So, you know, can you talk a little bit about, first off, I imagine it was a bit of a transition period going from a player to a coach. But, you know, can you talk a little bit about how you were able to translate the things that you would learn actually playing into the coaching side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly my experiences as a player helped me as a coach in so many different ways. I mean, the tactical part, the technical part on court, the actual, you know, mechanics of competing in a tennis match, playing tennis. I certainly you know, put a ton of hours into my tennis career as a junior and as a college student athlete or collegiate student athlete, but also just the lifestyle, the experience of being a student athlete, you know, just having, you know, your day is more or less spoken for before you wake up. You know, you've got a lot in the way of academic obligations, athletic obligations. You're there also for, I think, you know, just for your personal development. I mean, that's probably the single biggest takeaway from the experience, you know. And so I think I still feel very fortunate to have played for a man named Jeff Frank. Unbelievable coach. He was there at Davidson for over 35 years. And he was just first and foremost, a wonderful person, and was really a good steward of our experience there, and a good mentor and a good leader. And I was really lucky. I had great teammates, and, you know, I was, you know, an 18-year-old when I started, or 17 maybe. And, you know, I'm sure Coach Frank probably said, man, what are these knuckleheads doing? You know, you're young and making a lot of mistakes. But I'm
sure you've had similar moments yourself.
Yeah, I was lucky. I think I had a lot of people around me that cared about me and took time and showed interest in me. And so I think that made the transition into coaching you know, a little easier for me, because I think that
Sure.
what drew me to this profession is that, you know, I believe education is of, you know, paramount importance. And I felt like I could identify with this experience, and maybe I could help some of the kids that come to our school have a productive experience, have a worthwhile experience. And it's more than just tennis. You know, it's so much more than that. I think the marrow of this experience is interpersonal growth and development, obviously academic growth and development, and athletic growth and development too. But I felt like
Mm-hmm.
I could relate to the student athletes, and it attracted me to this profession. And I still make probably more mistakes than our players, and I'm still learning. Every year I learn new things, and you know, but I do feel like I've gotten a little better in some ways every year. And you know, I'm still try to be open and evolve as a person and as a coach. And I think we have a really good dynamic on our teams with our student athletes. They're great people, great young people, talented.
Yeah.
I think we have, you know, a really good kind of overall group chemistry and understanding of what we're trying to do. We do the best we can.
Well, you know, and you mentioned a little bit there in terms of, I feel as though for most careers, and especially one that you love, if you're not constantly learning things, I mean, if you become an expert at something, it's great, but it's also a little bit boring sometimes, you know, and you know, some of the greatest athletes in the world will tell you they continue to learn even after they stopped playing, you know, and I feel like that's a very critical thing in terms of just continuing to learn and learn alongside these student athletes and everything as well. You know, you started as an assistant at the College of Charleston, and then went on to be a head coach over at the University of Richmond, where you got him actually the most wins in almost a decade, just your second season. You had the 18th ranked for recruiting class. So first off, I have to say kudos on the salesman skills to have the 18th ranked recruiting class in just your second year as a head coach. But, you know, what was the adjustment like going from an assistant to being in control of an entire program? I had to imagine that was a pretty big jump.
Yeah, it's a pretty steep learning curve. I mean, that is, I think the single biggest difference, you know, is that you're the decision maker. And so nothing really moves forward. The machine doesn't go unless you're kind of authorizing and strategizing and effectuating those decisions. And so that's where maybe as an assistant, to some extent, you're insulated from some of that. And that's not to suggest that you aren't working hard or adding tremendous value. But I think you're probably not, you know, the buck kind of stops with you as the head coach. And so, you know, you're constantly looking at things and evaluating them and having to make decisions. And then you're trying to, in the aftermath of the year, to look at evaluate critically where you could, you know, improve the process or make the experience a little bit better overall. And you collaborate, of course, with your assistant. And I think for me, I've been really, really lucky to work at some fantastic institutions. And, you know, you talk about University of Richmond, what a great school, a beautiful place,
Yeah.
Fantastic quality of student there, you know, in terms of your academics, the academic profile. And so,
Sure.
you know, I've been so lucky to have so many amazing students along the course of my career. And that's defined my experience as much or more than anything else. And so, yeah, I think there was an adjustment in that first year or two. You're working some long hours and definitely making your fair share of mistakes. You learn how a bill becomes a law at each school is a little bit different.
Sure.
And so you're kind of, you're trying to put a little time in and learn and create relationships across campus. And
Yeah.
you become a little more efficient year in and year out. And so you try to challenge yourself and your students and just put together, I think, a program that, you know, gives everybody some value in some way, shape, or form. And so that's always what you try to do. And you're always kind of assessing how you've done. And I think probably most coaches are their own worst critics. They probably look at their own, years.
The good ones anyway.
Yeah, well, maybe so. Maybe we could have done this better or that better. And you try to give a realistic assessment and do a little bit better the next time out. And, you know, it's a collaborative effort. It takes the work of so many people. I mean, you're talking about sports information, you know, you've got sports medicine. I mean, all across the spectrum, you have to be a good united team. And I think that's one of the great things, like at Queens, that we, it's part of what attracted me to Queens was that, I felt like I could relate to this experience. It's a smaller school, that there's a premium on the academics, but you still have very competitive athletics. And so, I felt like I lived that experience, as a student athlete. And then I felt, man, I could see myself at Queens. I could see myself, reaching across campus and working collaboratively with your colleagues and in the best interest to serve your students. Right. I mean, so that was probably the largest point of appeal. I felt like I could relate to that experience. So.
I guess I got to ask you this. Everywhere you've been, obviously including here, I mean, since you've taken over here, you guys have brought home 2 conference titles, a couple of regular season titles as well, 3 straight regional appearances. I guess, you just alluded to it on what kind of brought you here to Queens. But my other question is, what is it that you think makes your players respond so well to your instruction? I mean, or I guess better yet, how do you approach it to get the most out of your athletes? Because I realize, there's all sorts of intricacies that go along with being a head coach, but I feel like that's one of the biggest tightropes to walk, is how you individually with this sport and any sport talk to athletes and get the most out of them on the court.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, your relationship with each one of your student athletes is an individual relationship. And I think it has to be founded on trust and respect. And, I think that when the students, when they sense or can see that you genuinely care for their personal well-being, as well as their academic and athletic well-being,
sure.
And then they're going to respond because they know that you are just trying to help them, have a good experience overall and you want to empower them to do their best work academically and athletically. And you're there to support that. But it isn't always easy, right? I mean, being a college athlete is a difficult process. It's a lot of early mornings and late nights and tons of work in between and tremendous sacrifice in some of the things that maybe they would want to do where they just, regular students, they're giving up a lot of their weekends, a lot of their free time to pursue perfection at the collegiate level in their sport. And so it takes a great deal of passion. It takes a great deal of commitment, perseverance, sacrifice. Those are the kinds of things that really you're training at the end of the day. And those skills will serve them well in their futures, professionally and personally. And I think to try to articulate some of those things to them where they can understand what the real marrow of the experience is about, and to help them, just see along the way that they will make mistakes. They will have difficulty. They will experience adversity. But try to help them understand how to make heads and tails of some of that. At the end of the day, I do think you want to recruit student athletes that are a good fit for the institution, that feel like when they're evaluating their opportunities in the landscape on the recruiting front, that they see a lot of academic potential or a lot of academic appeal in this experience, because that's really what they're here to do, is to get their degrees. And you want for them to be enthusiastic about those opportunities. And then obviously there's the athletic piece of it too. And they have to feel like they're going to be able to come into an environment where they're nurtured, but also challenged to reach their best. And so I think that's a challenge every year, especially with tennis, because tennis is an individual sport really at the junior level. And now you're coming into more of a team dynamic. And so you're asking kids who've been participating in an individual sport for probably most of their young adult lives. You're asking them to do some blocking and some tackling, which, for a football player, a basketball player, it might be a little easier, right? Apples more your experience. This is a bit of a transition from a mindset standpoint. And so that's probably an area where there's a little challenge, as a coach, to try to help them understand, that this is a bit of a different kind of endeavor. And I think that, it becomes easier once they start to see the benefits of being a part of a team. When you're a part of a team, you have people supporting you and caring about you, have a network, of folks that help you, support you, challenge you. And I think that it makes the experience more meaningful because you can share it. And that I think is really great. And so we try to focus on, having a culture that is supportive and that values, the academic side of things, the personal side of things, obviously the athletic side of things. We want to try to be our best, but we try to take a holistic approach in that sense. And we just the only thing you can really control is what you're doing every day, the work that you put in, and your attitude, and those kinds of things. I think if you have an effort standard and a conduct standard, and then you have a lot of people with a lot of really interesting backgrounds come together, and
Sure.
they can focus on some of those things, and then the rest of it is the nuance, which is fun. But
yeah,
those fundamental pieces I think have to be in place.
Well, and first off, let me tell you, you are the easiest interview I've ever had to do in my entire life. And that's nothing slighting any of the other coaches or anybody else we've talked to here on the Queen Sports Network. But I'm telling you, you give like your ability for sound bites is A-okay. But, I guess looking at a couple of things you said there in terms of, one, obviously adversity, and that's something that I feel like this younger generation has definitely had to understand what the meaning of that word is, especially over the last year and a half. But, looking at kind of the grand scheme of things, I feel like one of the biggest things for you is you want to make sure that in terms of academically, these kids are taken care of and they understand what it is they need to do. So can you talk a little bit more about the importance of academics on a grand scheme in terms of the way your team operates?
Sure. I'll say this. Probably the biggest pride point that I'll emphasize, and I'll brag on our teams a little bit. If you go back and look at our team GPAs for the last 5 or 6 years,
sure,
it's pretty impressive. Basically, if you doubled my college GPA, you'd still fall short of what our team average is. These kids are, these GPAs are sparkling. They are working really hard in the classroom. And that's to a person on both the men's team and the women's team. And I think that you try to recruit students who have demonstrated competency and diligence in the classroom and on the tennis court, of course. And so that's a starting point. But from there, they have to engage. They have to continually work. It's not easy. College life is demanding, as I mentioned before. Yeah. So we just try to, you try to work with every student individually because people have different abilities and skills, and all you can really ask is that they do their very best, right? And so we talk a lot with our students about school. I check in with them regularly about school. I try to be a solution-minded partner. There are times where you may have a flurry of deliverables in a given week, right? You might have 2 exams and a group project and a paper, and we stress the value and the importance of communication, because I understand as a former student athlete, man, there are times where you have like an action-packed week, and it may be, and you're sleep deprived, and then I'll say, hey, just let's discuss this, because if you need some help, if we need to figure out a slightly different schedule or strategy for a week or 2, we can work through difficulty, right? I think that's where we try to be flexible, and we try to partner with our students and just encourage that they communicate on the front end, which also means they have to be organized. So if they can kind of solve for some of those things, then I don't think that there are any impediments that we can't solve for. Right? We get in trouble when we're an hour late and $1 short, right? It's when we're disorganized and when we don't have a kind of an overarching strategy or understanding of what the next, month looks like in school and in tennis, and where the conflict could be, where the intersection of difficulty could be. And when we see that, then we're looking forward and we're planning. And then we're also working daily to do the things we're responsible for doing. So we try to focus a lot on encouraging that kind of behavior. And our kids, man, they just, really, they do so well, and it comes so naturally to so many of them. It's impressive. I'm always humbled.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I've said that not just for the athletes that I've interviewed since being here, but just in general of seeing how all these teams operate and just talking to teams and everything, is how mature these kids are here. And I think it alludes also to the idea of they come here not just to play sports. They come here because they know they're going to get a good education. And, with the smaller class sizes, it's in a beautiful location, but, there's all those little factors, but it always boils down to the fact of they're going to get a great education and be able to continue their playing career in a sport that they love. And, and I'm sure there are times where, student athletes will come to school and here to play a sport, but then say, you know what, I want to commit myself more to academics. And it's something that happens, but it's so refreshing to understand the fact that when these kids leave here, they're not just leaving here as, having 4-year really good careers in terms of athletics, I should say, but academically, they're ready for the next level by getting out into the workforce. And like you mentioned, networking and communication and time management. I have long said that is one of the biggest things I think missing from the educational system is those kind of classes that teach people how to balance a checkbook, little things like that. And from what I understand, it seems like the coaching staffs have really kind of taken that on themselves to help out and understand how the world works.
Right. And credit to admissions too, because I think they
Sure.
do a good job of evaluating the applicants in a holistic way. And I think that they're really good at finding, the right fit for our particular school. And so, and then, like you said, we're in a great location. You have incredible access to internships and professional development. And so those things really are, in my experience, right, from my perspective, students are choosing our university because of that, because they have access to such a dynamic city and so many professional opportunities in this city. And so that might be what ultimately moves the needle in terms of them selecting our school versus, another school or other schools. And so if you're selling that, but then you're not delivering on that promise, it doesn't seem like, I think that's a deal breaker. You have to honor, you've got to honor that if that's part of why the students are coming here, because they know that there's going to be life after sport, right? And so does success in the classroom, success at your internship, does that have to be mutually exclusive with success on the athletic field? Of course not. Those things can coexist. It just takes discipline, and it takes a lot of management and communication and organization. And so it's such a great period of time for these students, because they can learn so much of these skills and practice them, because they're practiced skills, I think, every day for 4 years. So when they graduate, man, these folks are ready to work hard, and they're ready to problem solve, and they have a lot of built-in skills that they've, unbeknownst to them, really been practicing for 40 years. They think they're out there practicing cross-court forehands, and what they're really accountability, and these are the things that they're really learning. And I think they see,
and they'll look back on it eventually and say, "Oh yeah, Coach Boykin did know what he was talking about." So there you go.
Maybe at least about that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, before I let you go, I know you got a lot of planning to do with the postseason getting underway this week. Let's talk a little bit about these teams, though, because they are something special here in 2021. We talked about the adversity these teams have had to overcome. Men's going into the postseason ranked 16th, women's at 18th. The men I know have won 7 straight. The women have been outstanding all season long. You got a handful of nationally ranked individuals, as those just came out the other day. Can you kind of talk about the makeup of these teams and what kind of goals you guys had coming into this year and how you've met them or possibly exceeded them?
Yeah, this has been such a surreal year in so many ways. I think it's been a very difficult year for a variety of reasons. And we were, as you know, we were virtual in the fall, and we didn't have a practice season or a training season. And so when we started in January, when we resumed classes in person, we had folks coming from all over the world that had very different levels of access to tennis, to fitness, so that first day or first week, we're kind of looking at everybody and saying, okay, let's get you guys over here, and let's get you guys, we thought we have some talented athletes on this team, and we have a blend of youth and experience, both of our teams. And I think that we've gotten a little bit sharper each and every week. I think that we're working really hard, and everyone's doing their very best, and that's really all you can ask them to do, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that, if you look at our teams, they're a little bit different this year, the makeup. I would say, like on our men's side, we were kind of joking about this the other day. We have 2 of our roster of 16, so 2 out of 16 of our players have competed in a conference championship pool. So that's a pretty small number, right? We're a pretty inexperienced group in many ways. And so I think it's good because it bodes well for our future. In terms of we return a lot of talented youngsters who are now getting more and more game reps, right? It also I think speaks to the kind of senior leadership that we've had this year. I'll mention a few of our upperclassmen. You know, we have Paolo Bompieri and Casper Rolfson and Simon Chung. And those guys have been amazing leaders. I mean, they have a lot of youngsters, you know, coming out to practice every day with them. And so they have just, I can't say enough about, you know, the examples that they set. If it's their work ethics or the way that they're performing admirably in school, or their internships, or, you know, on the court in competition, you know, all of these things, they do such a good job, and they've been amazing for us. So I'm excited to see how the men will finish this year. You know, it's going to be a new experience for most of us, but they've performed admirably so far. We've had a couple tight losses, you know, really close ones, and some close wins too, you know, so we've learned from those experiences, and I'm excited to see if we can apply some of what we've learned in the competitions to come. But I remain very optimistic, and I'm high on the group. They're fun to be around, and they work really hard. No doubt about that. On the women's side, maybe a little more balance in terms of experience, you know, kind of in our lineup. You know, you have our two seniors, Yana Flair and Sasha Davidzenko, they may be the best two players that have ever played at our school. I think that they're the only two All-Americans we've ever had in tennis. So they're on pace to be All-Americans again this year. You know, obviously a lot of it will depend on how they finish the year, but certainly they've performed at an All-American level so far. They haven't, to my knowledge, lost a single set in practice or competition, you know, as a doubles team, which is something that in my entire career,
that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Right? Demonstrate their consistency of effort, you know, day in and day out, but also in singles, they've been just fantastic. And so you have in there too, you have Victoria Veselinova and Katie Clausen, who are juniors, and they've, you know, had really great years as well. So we have, you know, some experience in our lineup. And then we have some new folks who've made a lot of contributions. And so maybe a little more balance in terms of the experience side on the women's front. But, you know, the same thing still kind of applies without a full training season. You know, it probably took us a little time this year to get started and to get our levels up to where we think we can be. And we're showing a little improvement, you know, each week. And so it's the same thing goes. I think, you know, the women's team, they're hard work and fun to be around. You know, we have a really good team chemistry. The girls all really, you know, look after each other and take care of one another on and off the court, and really support each other. And that's a great thing to see. And so I think both of our teams, there's a lot of parity in the conference this year. And you know, we're going as the 2 seed on both sides, but you know, we're going to have to play every match hard because there are a lot of good teams. So the first round is really the only thing that you can try to just focus on that. And hopefully we can be ready to compete well and play at our best level. And we'll certainly leave it out there. And then, you know, any tennis beyond that is tennis that we have to earn. So, you know, that's what we'll try to go in. And I think everyone's excited. So we're looking forward to it.
Hey, listen, just like the rest of this year, it's one day at a time, and it's one match at a time, you know, and you mentioned it, you know, and I feel like this has been a crash course this year of nothing is guaranteed. You know, there are no guarantees in life. You got to earn every single bit of it. But I would say that judging by what I've seen, at least on paper, and from being able to kind of tune in around the league and to see what has been going on. You mentioned a couple of weeks ago, you were standing in our office door and you said, this is a different year because there's a lot more parity in the league this season. And, you know, and like you said, going into it, as blind as a head coach would like to go into a season, you guys and every head coach in every sport had to do the same because you didn't have the normal face-to-face time that you usually have in a fall. And I know I was talking to Coach Haywood from soccer about that, and that was the one thing she said to me. She goes, the fact that we were all on our own islands and all of a sudden had to come back and say, hey, get ready, you're playing in 2 weeks. It's like, whoa. You know what I mean? So, again, I feel like with that kind of adversity, that has taught a lot of life lessons to these kids that hopefully they'll hold on to.
That's right. I think that, you know, we're all lucky right now to be on campus and to be healthy and to be playing a sport that we love. And if we can start, with that as kind of our baseline mindset, then I think it makes the adversity you'll face in competition a little easier. It's never going to be easy, but it might make it you can be a little more enthusiastic about, trying to solve for challenges that you're going to face, in competition. And, I really have to commend our teams. They've done a great job in a difficult year. And whatever happens, I could not be more proud of them. They're doing a really, really remarkable job this year. They've been great kids.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time. I'll let you get back to planning because I know you got a lot to do between now and the next couple of days. And actually, I should say next couple of weeks with, I would imagine, some pretty good NCAA showdowns coming your way as well. So go out, enjoy. We'll keep along with you the whole time. And, of course, Coach Boykin, appreciate you taking the time to sit down and have a conversation with us. And hopefully you can consider this a little break from the rest of the work that you got to do,
Thank you so much for having us, Mike. I really appreciate it. Best of luck to you guys.
Appreciate it. All right, folks, that'll do it for us. Coach Boykin, we appreciate him joining us and wish best of luck to tennis. We'll see you next time right back here on Get to Know the Royals.